What's the worst defense you've seen someone make in a court? Friend of mine once got a ticket for leaving her car standing in the marked off no parking zone in front of a grocery store, which she thought was outrageous because she was just running in to get a pack of smokes. Then she saw how much the ticket was for, something like $120, which she thought was just ridiculous because damn it, she was just running in for a pack of smokes. I mean, come on, how is that worth $120? So her plan was to go to court and contest the ticket and point out to the judge how ridiculous that was and offer to compromise it like maybe $40 because for Pete's sake, she was just running in for a pack of smokes, and let's be reasonable here. Yes, her plan was to haggle with the judge over how much the ticket should be worth. So she goes to court and sits there most of the day waiting for her case to be called. And eventually she gets bored and goes outside to grab a smoke and hang out. And while she's out there, her case is called. She missed the whole thing, didn't even get to try the whole come on, $120? For that? Come on, I'll give you $40 and even that's highway robbery defense on the judge, and got hit for the full value of the ticket plus court costs. A guy was in court for a DUI, and he insisted on taking the stand when his lawyer advised him not to. Turned out he wanted the judge to know the cop who arrested him was just some rude kid trying to be a big shot and he wasn't even drunk. He'd only had 2 bottles of wine with dinner. His lawyer interrupted him to try to get him to stop talking, and he told his lawyer to shut up. Then the judge advised him to listen to his lawyer, and he told the judge, I'm not a damn child, don't interrupt me, and the judge just smiled and sat back and said please, proceed. We all knew it was over for this guy. He got maximumed on the charge and advised in the future if he was going to pay for a lawyer, he should listen to him. I was the bailiff on a kidnap/rape case. The defendant was proper, acting as his own attorney. During jury selection he had the option to wear civilian clothing instead of his jail clothes. He chose to remain in his jail attire complete with handcuffs and waist restraints. It came time for him to cross-examine the victim. Understandably, she was very upset before he even started. She was crying and refused to look at him. The defendant's first question went like this. You seem upset. Does it make you nervous to be questioned by the person that raped you? You could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. He was found guilty and sentenced to 46 years to life in prison. I had a guy come into my jail with a robbery charge. He tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding because he just took a girl's money and kept the weed he was supposed to buy her for himself, so at most he was just a shitty boyfriend. He made his situation worse by throwing in, did she tell you we are fucking? She was underage. The father retained joint legal and physical custody, although that may have changed in a subsequent trial. The result of this case was a stipulation that the father obtain the services of a personal care attendant to assist with toileting when the girl was present. The father wasn't inclined to bear that expense, and I suspected would try to skirt around it, thereby making the girl responsible for reporting against him to assure enforcement. The situation was already rife with the father's manipulations being used against an immature girl who just wanted her dad's love, so this was a disappointing outcome. In addition, even if the toileting issue were resolved, a PCA wouldn't help the father understand or address his daughter's emotional and safety needs. The dad had a free attorney from a men's rights organization and lived on disability income. The mother worked and was hard pressed to support her family on one income with no child support and to pay attorney fees in addition, but she was continuing to fight for full custody when last I knew. 17 more applies. Lawyer here bored at work and not wanting to get started on something, so I've seen some very stupid shit, though I mostly don't do criminal cases, so the stupid shit I tend to see requires a bit of explanation. However, when I was in law school I worked with a group that helped get restraining orders for people in abusive relationships. Family court in Queens was very much a cattle call situation, and it was easy to watch hearing after hearing, which I always found fun. On one particular day there were 2 absolutely amazing hearings. One was a case of 2 gay men. The guy claiming abuse was a huge man. Fat and definitely over 6 feet 4 inches. He was against his tiny partner. At first the magistrate was very incredulous, likely thinking what we were all thinking about the massive size disparity between the two. When the tiny guy got up to speak, he started scolding his larger partner for saying things like that, and at some point, he threw a pen at the bigger man. The bigger guy started to cry, and then the little guy started taunting him. The other involved a man trying to get an ex parte order against his girlfriend, which is relatively rare. It happens, but the vast majority are women getting them against men. This time however, before his particular hearing could start, a woman came into the courtroom flanked with 2 other women. They were all 3 straight out of central casting for what you'd imagine New York City gang women to look like. They walk in and see the woman's partner seated in the courtroom, though his hearing wasn't up yet. She immediately starts threatening everyone in the room, but especially the magistrate. The magistrate had them escorted out with the bailiffs, who called an extra. About 30 minutes later, the dude's hearing was up. The magistrate basically immediately granted the restraining order and said he'll put a note in for the full hearing about that woman's conduct. I was a juror for a case against a woman that was charged with selling a stolen gun to a pawnbroker and possession of a gun by a convicted felon. She took the stand and admitted to finding the gun at a friend's house and taking it to the pawnbroker. Her attorney's entire closing argument was that the state failed to prove that it was a gun and the charges should be dropped. Never mind the fact that she admitted to it being a gun. The guy that owned the gun said it was his gun, and we had it right there in front of us. The defense said it was not a gun because the state had not fired it to prove it was a gun. And of course, as soon as we get back to the room to deliberate, one of the other jurors said he was not convinced it was a real gun. That was a really long day. Edit. Wow, this is by far the most karma I've ever gotten on a comment. To those wondering, we had the gun in the jury room, but it was in a clear plastic box. We did have a bailiff come in at one point to take it out and pull the slide back. We were not allowed to handle it ourselves. Traffic court. I was the defendant. I show up in a suit and tie and am waiting for my attorney. Judge is there. First part of the day is just making sure we all show up, and then the city attorney offers us a discount to plead guilty. That is, first time offenders have to sign up for a class on safe driving. Other than that, 30% off the top. Always fight your tickets, people. Anyway, I wasn't going to accept a plea deal cause I had an airtight case. Even my lawyer agreed. She was nice and actually listened to me and did the groundwork. So she shows up. I've already checked in, and she and I refuse the initial offer. She then tells me to go wait outside while the city attorney tries, again, to get me to take the plea, and others. So the thing with traffic court is that the officer who wrote the ticket has to show up. My attorney was concerned because the guy who ticketed me typically shows up. So we go back into court, and I'm sitting there, and a group of guys come in all wearing ripped jeans and graphic shirts with dirty work boots. One of them looks familiar, but I can't place him, and figure it's just some more people waiting for tickets. They were the cops for the various cases. The judge was not amused. Their defense for their condition was that court was too early. Me and about 10 other people all had our tickets dismissed. I have the signed letter from the judge framed. We didn't have to say a thing. The poor city attorney though. He looked like he was about to die when the judge asked to speak to him. Like seriously, I honestly feel he felt he was walking to his execution. I once got popped on my first day at a new job for doing like 40 in a school zone. The cop said something like, "We've had complaints about people speeding here, so I had to spend my morning running radar in this location. If you were to fight this ticket in court, the charges would be dropped, and you wouldn't get any points on your license. I have to show up in court. So remember, if I'm not in court, you win automatically." I showed up at court, and he was nowhere, and every ticket he wrote that day was dismissed. He made it clear to me, without actually saying the words, that he had no intention of going to court. It's the only time I've ever fought a ticket. Usually, I'm stone cold guilty and just pay it. During law school in class I had to defend a hotel manager who was putting hidden cameras in the rooms. Edit. Since this blew up, I want to note this was probably a civil suit and motion to dismiss. I could only really argue the law, not facts, i.e. the goal is to convince the judge that the conduct, as alleged, was not unlawful. I couldn't really get into issues of evidence, or if he really planted the cameras and so on, and settling was not part of the exercise. I had no ideas. Case law was pretty much in thorough consensus that it is in fact unlawful to do that. Yet, I had to put something together for oral argument, and also answer questions from the teacher/judge. It was a total disaster. I remained somewhat composed, somehow, but I really had no argument. The best I could do was that it was a digital camera and the files had never been opened or viewed, as far as evidence showed, so in some sense there never had been an actual image of the hotel guests, just a bunch of ones and zeros that could of course become a video as soon as someone opened the file with proper software. It was a shitty and unconvincing argument.